All right, guys, we are going to get started on our animation project, and you guys will be creating an animation that shows an object in motion. So I have your instructions written here on your assignment. You are using the Google Slides application to create an animation that shows an object in motion. You can use the shapes and clip art in Google Slides to create your animation frames, or if you want, you can draw your own objects or illustrations using whatever app you're most comfortable with. For your success criteria, you are going to be creating a animation that uses 30 or more frames, and that is 30 points of your grade. You're going to be creating an animation that uses 4 or more colors, and that is 20 points of your grade. You're going to be making sure that your animation has a background, and that is worth 10 points of your grade. And your animation should be showing any object that you choose in motion, traveling from one side of the screen to the other, and that is also worth 30 points of your grade. Finally, you need to make sure that you are sharing the link to your finished animation when you turn your assignments in for 10 points of your grade. I have a example that I'm going to show you guys. I made this using clip art and the shapes tool on the Google Slides program. So I've chosen to show a little tennis game here. I have found a image of a tennis racket using the Google search embedded in the Google Slide document to find a clip art of a tennis racket. And as you can see, my clip art has no background, so it looks really realistic sitting on this photograph that I've chosen. I used the shape tool on Google Slides to create my ball, and I used a gradient to give that ball a three-dimensional quality. And I used the little, I think it's like a comic book shape there to give you the sense of the ball getting hit either by the racket or bouncing off the ground, just to kind of emphasize that motion. So, you guys are going to be thinking of an object or person or anything that you want to show in motion on your animation project. And you should be showing whatever subject you've chosen moving across the screen, either back and forth like mine is, or in one direction if that's what you choose to do. So to get started, you're going to open the animation Google Slide document that I have attached to your assignment so that you can create your work on an assignment that's already attached. You don't have to worry about adding it later. So everybody's going to start off with a blank Google Slide, and this is where you're going to start adding your details, whatever you're choosing to animate. When I created mine, I did a search using the insert and image menu, and I searched the web for my first object, which was my tennis racket. So I just typed in tennis racket, and you can see there's a couple of, autofills that will help you narrow down your search. You can choose clip art, you can choose drawing. I actually decided to write in no background because I don't want my tennis racket to have a background to it. So I'm just going to do a search, and you can see the one that I chose is right here. Now, you're not going to be able to tell if your clip art or picture has a background until you add it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make sure it has no background. So I'm going to select this tennis racket right here, and I'm going to click on Insert. And now I've got my tennis racket. And to make sure that my clip art does not have a background, I'm going to go to my background setting, and I'm just going to change the color of the background. I'm going to change it to just any random color just to make sure that this object has no background to it. So I'm going to choose blue right here, and I can see now that there's no background. If I chose an image that did have a background, you would see probably a white area around that object showing you that there is a background. So let me see if this one has one. Nope, this one doesn't either. So that's just how you can tell that there is no background. So obviously there's lots of tennis rackets that you can choose from. Let me see if I can find an example of one that does have a background so you know that it's something that you can't really use. Let's try erasing no background. It will just search for a regular old tennis racket. And I will choose this one right here. That one doesn't have a background either. This might be harder to show than I realized. I did a good job thinking of my first object, didn't I? So, for example, if we just chose this one right here, this one obviously has a background because it's a photograph. So you see we have the green background here. And this kind of makes it hard for us to imagine this is a tennis racket that's being animated on a real animation. So again, that's why you want to choose a shape that has no background. All right, so I added my tennis racket and I knew I wanted to have two. So I simply copied that picture and I pasted a duplicate and I simply adjusted the ratio of my tennis racket so it was facing in the reverse direction just by clicking and flipping that around. And now I have two tennis rackets that are facing in both directions. Whatever you're choosing to animate yours, you're going to arrange them however you want on your canvas, and then you're going to start thinking about how you're going to be creating your motion. So the next step that I did was I created my ball because that's the part of my animation that's going to be moving the most. And I just used a simple circle shape, clicked and dragged to create that ball. And then I used my fill color to choose a gradient to make that ball look three-dimensional and realistic. And then I went back to my shapes and I think I went to callouts. And yeah, that's where these little animated, I guess they're explosion clip arts. So I just used that and I created that little kind of symbol that shows that the ball is getting hit by the racket and then moving across the screen. I'm just going to choose yellow for it because when I think of cartoons, it's just kind of the color that I think of when I see those little action details. I'm going to turn the border off because I don't want it to have a border. I'm going to click on transparent so it's just yellow with no border. And I actually want this to be behind my ball. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to order, and I can use these settings to send my ball behind any of the other objects that I've added to my animation. So I could send it all the way to the back by clicking send to back, but I just want it to be behind the ball, not behind the racket. So I'm just going to send it backwards. And now it is behind my ball, but in front of my racket. So I basically set up my first frame of my animation by doing all of this. What I'll do next is I'm going to create a duplicate of this first frame to start showing the movement of my ball. So I'm going to duplicate my slide and I'm going to move all of my objects to show that motion happening. And I'm going to have my ball move down and I'm going to duplicate my slide again and I'm going to have my ball move even further down. So you're going to create this sequence of slides to show the motion of whatever object you've chosen to create for your animation. So if I come back to my finished product here, you can see how I created my slide. I added a photograph to show a background for my animation here. I chose this picture of a tennis court because obviously that makes sense. It's a tennis game, so there should be a tennis court in the background. And I showed you how I animated my ball on that first slide. On this one, I actually went as far as to moving the racket to hit the ball as well. So if you look at my finished animation, the racket actually moves and hits the ball back and forth. So that creates a really realistic kind of sense. You notice that when the ball hits the ground, it kind of bounces. And to make that happen, I'm going to scroll down here. When I got to the part where my ball was hitting the ground, I actually kind of squished it down a little bit. So you see how the ball is slightly squished and not as round as it was in the picture before it. That kind of gives you the sense that it's hitting something and it's affecting the shape of the ball, and the ball is bouncing off the ground. And then it bounces back in the opposite direction and continues along its path. So you can see that I've used quite a few slides here to create this sequence, and I've had my object go back and forth at least a couple of times. Remember that your slide deck needs to have at least 30 slides to create your motion in your animation. The more gradual your movement is, whatever object you've decided to create movement with, the more realistic this will appear. All right. And so we have our finished illustration, and it looks really nice. So remember that when you are getting ready to turn this in, you do need to create a link to the finished animation. So I'm going to show you one more time how to do that. So once you are ready and you have all of your slides and you've checked them to make sure they all look good, and you can always just click through them to just see a little bit of a preview of how your animation is going to look. You can even present it and flip through using your keyboard arrows just to see how the animation is before you publish it. Once you're ready and once you're happy with all your animations and you've met all the criteria for this assignment, you're going to go to File. You're going to go down to where it says Publish to the Web. And this is going to give you the settings that you need to create your animation in a automatic player. The fastest we can make this animation using these settings right here is every second the animation slides change. But there is a way we can speed this up, and I'll show you that in just another minute. We're going to make sure we click on slide or start slideshow as soon as the player loads. We're going to click on restart the slideshow after the last slide, so this loops, and that's going to give us the link. I've already published mine, so my publish button has been pressed already, and I already have my link. But if you're doing this for the first time, your publish button will be yellow, and you'll need to click on it to create this link right here. So to see your finished animation, you're simply going to copy this link and paste it into a new browser tab. And I mentioned that when you did this, it's going to be probably not as fast as you'd like it to be because we've already gone to the fastest setting, which means the slides are only switching 1 second at a time. But there is a way to create a faster animation, and that is to repaste your link. And you'll notice that at the end of your link, you have the number that says 1000. If you decrease the amount of zeros in this number and make it 100 instead, or even 10 or 1, this will speed up your animation considerably. I think that making it 100 instead of 1000 works really well. I think that 10 or even 1 are much too fast. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Now I've changed the link to say 100 instead of 1000. And you'll see how that actually speeds up my animation and looks a lot better now. So just like you did with the name animation that you practiced with, you are going to be copying that link and pasting it into your assignment on Google Classroom along with the original Google slide deck that you used to create your animation. So have fun with this, guys. You have a lot of creativity that you could be using here, deciding whatever kind of objects you want to animate, showing movement from across the screen from one side to the other.